Hello and welcome to the Shack News Chattycast, the podcast that loves you so much it got you a giant, impractical teddy bear. I'm one of your hosts, Steve Watts.
I'm your other host, Brian Carr. Steve, today's Chattycast brought to you, as always, by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Chattycast. That's CHATTY. Love.
That's right. So every week on the Chattycast, we pick a big topic, post about it in the Shack News Chatty, and then we talk about it in detail with your comments fueling the discussion. Today's guest is no one. Us being a functional website, we have to put, content considerations first, and everyone is otherwise occupied.
So what does that say about us? Like, are we?
Yeah.
I'm not actually part of it. I'm not part of the payroll. So I'm functionally.
And I have to be here because I'm the one who made up this thing. Anyway.
But it's intimate, and really deep down, you knew that's the way it had to be.
Yeah. I'm telling myself that this was fated to be in some way, because today our big topic is romance and relationships in games. So it's somehow weirdly appropriate that it's just the two of us.
Honestly, let's be honest. I think that the two of us might be one of the longest relationships either of us has had.
That's true. That's very true. Wait a minute, that's really sadly true.
Yeah, we've been together longer than just about any.
I'm questioning a lot of my life. Anyway,
the saddest thing. It is the saddest thing.
So
you like my glasses, by the way? I wore them.
We're going to
special.
talk about relationships and romance, specifically as they are portrayed in games, and sort of the larger cultural context of that. But first, we're going to talk about what we are playing. Brian, are you playing anything romantic?
No, but I am in love with this idea of playing games. I'll tell you that. It's been a very busy couple of weeks. So as you imagine, me being a professor and all, I've got to make sure that we do professor things. I've got a lot of students to advise and classes to teach, assignments to grade, that kind of stuff. So I haven't had a ton of time. And I've been trying to do that 4 in February thing. Apologies to Mike Suzak. It's probably not going to happen. I did make my way through Lara Croft Go. I didn't finish. What's that?
I said quitter.
I did not quit. Well, okay, I haven't quit. I have not quit yet. I'm just saying it's not likely to happen. Okay.
Okay. I mean, I'm not calling you a failure or anything like that. Would be
well, the tone of your voice indicated otherwise, but it usually does. I have been playing a couple of those games though. I've been playing. Like I said, I finished Lara Croft Go. At least I saw credits roll, so I didn't finish the bonus campaign or whatever. I'll get to that eventually, but I counted it as done.
Yeah, you can count it. You saw credits.
Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. I've been trying to work my way through when I don't fall asleep immediately at night. But
is it Shantae's fault or is it?
It's not Shantae's fault. I'm just exhausted by the time I actually get down to like playing something in bed. And I'm trying to clear as much stuff as I can before the 1-2 punch of Street Fighter and Fire Emblem next week. But that's why I'm saying it's probably not going to happen. But I'm going to try. I've got I could play Treasure Planet on the Wii U gamepad deal. So I think I can make this work still. But I've been playing a lot of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, if you want to hear about that.
How much do you love Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes?
I don't know if
I'm keeping it on message here.
Like, love is a weird word to associate with it. It's more of just, it's a constant thing I do, so I'd feel weird if it wasn't there. Which I guess, after a while, like that's love, isn't it, in its own way?
Just comfortable.
Yes, I'm comfortable. But it's still good. Like I will set up one of those, like a Galactic War or something like that, where I can just hit auto and I'll just have it run while I'm walking to class, or I'll have it run while I'm walking to do whatever. So it's good. I got a Finn. I got Finn now. Finn's part of my team. I've been leveling him up. He's a good solid power hitter. Not as good as Rey. Rey is actually broken. But I can't get her. She's a lot harder to get. So
would you say she's a Mary Sue?
No, I would not say that. I will never say that. But yeah, so that's basically what I've been playing. Nothing super interesting, but I'll have a lot to talk about next week for sure.
Yes, I'm sure you will. And actually, one of the things that you'll have to talk about next week is one of the things. Well, no, it won't be launched next week by the time we talk.
Not in time we do the show.
Fire Emblem. I've been playing Fire Emblem, is what I'm saying. And the review embargo is not up yet, but the preview embargo is. And they have very weird, fuzzy lines of what counts as a preview. I've seen a lot of previews going up that are like our first impressions, and it's like, well, you're playing it for review, So that's basically like a review in progress. But I thought it was an appropriate game for this topic this week because one of those things that Fire Emblem gets a lot of attention for is its relationship mechanics, and how that's tied into the gameplay. You fight alongside someone, and oh my god, I just noticed the glasses. I was reading this.
I literally I leaned in and I waved them at you like, "Hi, Steve, how you doing?"
Oh my lord! All right, well, those not watching the video feed
you see that they sparkle? There's glitter on them.
Yes, it's very fetching. Those not watching the video feed are missing out. So go to our YouTube page.
I'll put a picture up. It'll be some. I don't know. You'll see it.
Anyway,
I'm sure Asif will do a screen cap or something like right now. I hope he's watching, so he does. Asif, if you're watching, screen cap it.
So Fire Emblem is all about it's a tactical strategy RPG, but it also has this like love blooms on the battlefield like kind of side mini game thing. And it's kind of always had that. That's not like anything new for this iteration. But for those who may not know Fire Emblem, you're doing tactical battles like normal, but when you fight next to somebody, you get sort of a bonus the better those two characters' relationship is to each other. And then when you're not actually in battles, you get little dialogue exchanges between them based on how much they like each other. And eventually they can get married and have kids. And somehow through time travel, the kids always show up. It's weird. Like that's a thing. That was like an actual plot element in Fire Emblem Awakening. So I can't say that much evaluative about Fire Emblem, obviously, because the review embargo isn't up yet. I will say I am through one of the 3 games. It's a lot of Fire Emblem.
So here's the thing that I've not quite been clear on. I've heard that this essentially is if you take each component part of the total Fire Emblem Fates package.
Yes.
It's not as long as Awakening. Like Conquest is not as long.
I need to go back and check Awakening.
I'm basically mostly on what you told me, but
yeah. But I need to go and check my game clock in Awakening and see. I need to do a comparison.
I don't remember Awakening being super long. I remember maybe like a 20, 30-hour deal, which is still a hefty game, but not
that's probably about
like some 70-hour jaunt.
Yeah, and I don't want to reveal how long it took me to finish Birthright, but I kind of sense that like each one individually is a little shorter, but they also have just a ton of optional missions that are like procedurally generated. So
any one of these would probably be it would give you enough to do. But my theory, having not finished all 3 of them yet, so this is a preview statement and not a review statement. My theory is that the sort of story is meant to be taken as a whole. You know what I mean? Like that when you choose, there comes a splinter point very early in the game after mission 6. Like the first 6 missions are basically tutorials, and there comes a splinter point where you choose which family you want to side with in this war. Where they're basically fighting over you, like that's sort of the flashpoint of all this. So you choose which family you want to side with, and having gone all the way through one campaign, it's sort of like you see how the other family sort of rips itself apart with your absence, And I kind of get the sense that like the exact opposite will happen now that I'm doing the other one. That's interesting, yeah.
So I think it's sort of meant to illustrate like this person makes a difference, with whichever side they're in. They're the glue that holds these families together in different ways. It's kind of difficult because when you choose Birthright, which is the first one I chose, it's the easier one of the 2. You're obviously siding with like the good guys. Like there's a definitely like good guy, bad guy mechanic. Like the Conquest Kingdom, the Nor Kingdom. Like they are ruled by a king that like the moment you see him, you're like, he is evil. Like he's very obviously, he has the evil drawn face. He's drawn to be evil.
Sure.
The other members of the family are not necessarily evil. In fact, they seem generally pretty good and actually seem to genuinely
What's the guy's name? Because I think I saw him in some of the materials.
King Garen. And every time I see it, I think Ganon, like Zelda. but yeah, it's King Garen.
Everything about this dude is just like, this is clearly the bad guy.
Yes, like very obviously. They don't make any bones about it. And, to their credit, they don't exactly pull their punches on that. They don't like tease it out, and you're like, okay, yeah, I know he's the bad guy. Come on, get to the reveal. You know, like almost as soon as you meet him, he's like, good, now kill these unarmed prisoners.
Oh,
like,
that's not something a good man would ask me to do.
like, no, I don't want to do that. And then he decides to punish you. Like that's sort of what kicks off this whole thing. So like
Here, eat this baby.
yeah, pretty much. But in both families, there's like 4 sibling type characters. One's your adoptive family and one's your biological family. So the adoptive family siblings with that evil father, like they seem to actually genuinely care about you, and they're good people. You know. Meanwhile, the birth family, like they care about you because they've missed you all this time. So it's like you've got these dueling families that they're sort of being thrust against each other because of this evil king that, you know. Mm-hmm. So having started Conquest, the sense of it is more like the way they sort of promote it, and the promotional material is in this version you're sort of trying to like change things from the inside, you know. And there has already been, I'm not that far into it, but there has already been a few missions that it's like he'll order you to do something kind of horrible, and you go there and accomplish the objective, but do it in a way that's not horrible. So you're sort of like subverting what he actually wants you to do, but he can't complain because you technically did your job. So that's sort of an interesting little twist, and I think that might end up being the more fleshed out of the 2 stories, because the Birthright story is very much like you side with the good guys and then you go after the bad guys.
Sure.
You know.
Now I'm curious because they in the early promotional materials for this game and kind of all the messaging they've had around it is they really want to play up the fact that this is a hard choice to make. That if you are playing,
like when I got the choice, it's like, I mean, very minor spoilers if you care about this, either, you know, mute me for a couple seconds or whatever. But very, very minor spoilers. Near the beginning, there is a death that is significant, and I'm of course being vague about the spoiler, but there's a death that's significant. That's sort of the thing that spurs on this war, and of course, you know, the death that's significant is in the good guy's family, and it was caused by this evil king who's very obviously evil, and like it's so not a hard choice that if you choose the conquest path to side with the Nor Kingdom, the justification for doing so, like you're learning why afterwards, you know, like the dialogue that takes place, like sort of retroactively justifies what you did, where your character is like, well, I need to confront him and ask why he did this and things like that, instead of it sort of presenting you with these 2 equally valid moral choices and then you make a choice.
So that's kind of interesting because you are asking people to like, unless you get if you get the physical copy, right? I think you're actually locked into whatever physical copy you got. Like I've got, you started with Birthright. That's one I've got ordered. So I'll start with that side of the story. And then you get the other 2 later. You can buy them as DLC. Whereas with the digital version, you download the digital version and then it will just download the rest of whatever one you pick. And so then, of course, there's that third part that's supposed to be the true story that you play after the other 2. And so basically what Nintendo's trying to do is say, hey, you want to play this? You're going to have to just give us like $80. Just give it to us.
Pretty much.
And you will get all of the Fire Emblem.
But like I said, I think that's how it's meant to be told. Like that's meant to tell a complete story of. And
I'm not against that. It's just
sort of the run Lola run of video games, you know, where it's like alternate path. Here's the real one, and the 2 alternates sort of inform what the, you know, quote unquote real one is. Like seeing how wrong things can go in the other 2 versions. Sort of like I get the sense that like that's what is meant to spur you on to the third one, where you're like, well, if I choose that path, things work out in some ways, but everything else turns to shit in other ways. And if I choose the other path, exact same thing in reverse. So like, you know, you're looking for compromise basically. On the romance angle, I got married in Birthright. I played as a lady, because I usually do in these games. And I kind of wonder if I played as a male, if they would make it like a maid instead, because there's the maid and butler class is the new these 2 new classes. But like in either version now that I've played, at least the start of both versions, in either version, almost as soon as you start, you have your butler come and be like, hey, I'll follow you wherever, whatever. I'm totally with you. You know, it's a very devoted butler named Jacob. And apparently in anime, and at least in Fire Emblem, butlers are just known for like knife throwing skills. I don't know. He's pretty awesome, is my point. And so I think he's sort of like the I don't want to say default, but almost like the default choice. Like he's the one that is very easy to romance because he already is with you all the time, right from the beginning, and so you have more opportunities to talk to him and battle alongside him and build that relationship. So I just got to the point where I was like, hey, do you want to reach rank S with this character? You can only do it with one. And I was like, okay, sure, but they made a pretty good team. She was like a sword person and he was throwing knives, so he got to like kind of hang back while she was doing her sword foo. They were pretty deadly together. Also in Birthright, this might be that I was playing on an easier mode because I clicked the easier mode on accident, thinking like, well, that's the one that's selected by default. I should do that. It might be that I was in an easier mode, or it might be that Birthright is meant to be the easier one. I will say Conquest is much harder already. But they give you a character in Birthright that is so overpowered it feels like you're cheating. And I feel like in Conquest, he has an equivalent on the Conquest side. I feel like once I get access to that Conquest character, I'll know whether or not they do that in both games. But he was basically like my murder machine. Like there were.
Well, that was in Awakening. They had Frederick, I think it was a guy who was completely imbalanced, especially in the early part of the game.
I mean, they introduce characters every once in a while where it's like, okay, this person's like really powerful. Like at one point, they introduced this woman riding like you've never seen her before. She just like shows up at a battle. This woman riding a winged creature with like magical arrows or a spear or something. And she's really powerful for a while. And, like there's wafting and waning of overpowered characters. But this character just straight up till the end of the game, there were like a few missions in a row that like, it was like the mission was instead of kill all the enemies, it was like kill the boss. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to rush this dude at the boss. I'm just going to like run him straight towards him and I'll be fine. And I just like finished a few missions that way. And I'm wondering if that's going to be the same thing. If you took a look at the artwork, you could probably guess which character this is. It's the one that looks like a freaking samurai ninja. And his equivalent on the Conquest side is sort of the one that looks like a knight. Like there's a very Europe versus Asia feel to this game, where the Nor army is very European and the Hoshido army is very Asian, obviously. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. That's what I can say so far. Look for my
time. Yeah, I'm really interested to see your review because we've worried on here. Is this too much Fire Emblem?
I'm still worried about if it's too much. I mean, I've got less than a week to finish basically like 1.5 more games worth of Fire Emblem. And it's over Valentine's weekend. So thanks for that, Nintendo.
I'm willing to bet that you're probably going to be, like, good, bad, or otherwise, you're probably going to be set on Fire Emblem for a while.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, that's enough Fire Emblem, you guys. Yeah, I didn't feel. This isn't to say I didn't feel satisfied. Like I did feel like Birthright was a full game, but I didn't feel like I had gotten too much after Birthright. So it is enough that you feel like you can jump into another one.
Sure. And I think like the DLC thing being scheduled the way it is, like you could probably play it, give it a month or two, come back, drop $20, see the next part of the story. You could do it that way too. So that might even be a great way to do it too.
Yeah, and there might even be price drops eventually.
Probably
like that. Sales. On
It'll be a while.
Yeah, eventually. And let's see. I think as a result of getting this might be something that's already known, but I think they gave me the physical. It has all 3 on the cart version, and I think because of that, I got these 2 special items that basically you can turn anybody into these 2 specialized classes. One's called like a dread fighter, and the other's some sort of winged, character. So if you're considering, if you still have the option of getting the all 3 package, that's a bonus. Well, no one does, but
no, that sold out like instantly.
If you just like, I might as well be saying like, well, if you can find a Marth amiibo, here's what you should do.
I did though. Like I told you, like I told you that. Yeah, like for some reason Best Buy had them for like $10 last week. So I'm like,
and you didn't get me one because you don't even care about our relationship anymore.
Nope.
Anyway, we can move on.
I didn't know
Unless
you
you have
wanted
any
to
other
know.
games you want to talk about first. Anything?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. So our big topic this week is love. It is almost February 14th. And that means greeting card inspired love is in the air. This is the time of year we see romance emphasized on TV and movies, but video games have had a rocky relationship with the concept of relationships. For as well as games have captured types of violence that aren't even possible, they've often struggled to represent real human connections, including love. This week, we're talking about how love is represented in games, from highly scripted stories like Final Fantasy to the choose-your-own-adventure style of BioWare's dialogue systems. What do games get right and wrong about love? How can they improve? And what video game relationships have stood out to you?
See, I was wanting to kick this off by singing the theme to Love Story, but with clever new lyrics. And I don't think I can do that legally. Where do games begin to tell the story of how great a love can be?
No one will ever see it. It's fine. We're not going to get sued.
The sweet love stories that are older than the sea.
It was parody. It's fair use.
Yeah, I changed one word. It's parody.
So I think to start it off, we can talk about game relationships that have stood out to us for one reason or another, and then we can sort of move into the ones that haven't, or where games have struggled in different ways.
Final Fantasy is going to come up a lot. I'm going to tell you right now. That's like if you are if you're wondering the roadmap for this show, it's going to be a lot of Final Fantasy.
Yeah, sorry about that, Final Fantasy haters. But that's where our history is.
We'll work some other stuff into.
We were actually talking about this earlier, and the example that came to mind when I was looking for an image for this, which I didn't choose because I thought it might be hokey, was I always say Titus. I know Square pronounces it Titus.
It's Titus. Here it's
which I think is stupid.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all because, okay, he's a character that's defined by water. He plays blitzball. Yeah.
So obviously,
Titus. It makes sense. I know that Kingdom Hearts or whatever says Titus. I don't care.
I know. I'm with you. But the relationship story there, it was when I was much younger, obviously. But I feel like that was one that impacted me a lot when I first played it, because Final Fantasy X, more than most Final Fantasy games, took its time and really developed these characters over it was a road movie. It was like they're together basically the entire time, and they're learning from each other. They're changing. They're having a lot of conversations, and so it presented it pretty believably, where they really took their time with that relationship and grew closer. And spoilers for this, I don't even know how long, 20-year-old game. Spoilers for Final Fantasy X. There comes a point at the very end when Titus is disappearing. They've beaten the final boss, and as a result, he is disappearing. And there's this ethereal hug that I still think is like one of the sweetest signs of affection in video games, where he kind of reaches around her and gives her the motion of a hug, even though he can't actually touch her because he's starting to fade and become, basically a ghost.
Yeah, whatever. However that played out, I don't remember the specifics, but that moment is really, really something. And I think what jumps out to me and why I like this one more than anything is that because when we talk about Final Fantasy X's love story, everybody focuses on the awkward scene where it's like they're laughing. And, exactly. I mean, I think there's a reason for that, but you're right, it comes across as silly. Yeah. But the focus and this, I'm going to make a comparison here, and I'm going to instantly lose like maybe half of the people that'll listen to this, but just bear with me. I think Final Fantasy X's love story is a lot like Casablanca's. Now, am I saying that it is on the same level? Am I saying that Final Fantasy X is to video games what Casablanca is to film? Not even close. What I am saying
this isn't Kane of video games, obviously.
No, it's not that either, but that's a discussion for another time. That's like a whole other Chattycast. But the thing that strikes me about this, and what I love about Casablanca, the reason I think it's the best romance ever committed to film, is that the two people who are so right for each other, who care so deeply for each other, who care about each other, don't get together. Okay? And they don't get together because there is a greater purpose. There is something bigger than both of them. And they sacrifice the thing that makes them happy, their own enjoyment, their love for each other, in service of that greater good, that greater thing that benefits people well beyond them, right? Humphrey Bogart, Casablanca, Humphrey Bogart, lets Ilsa go, or Rick lets Ilsa go because he knows that in order to help the resistance, in order to help stave the Nazi advance, she needs to be with Laszlo, right? And they both know it. They don't like it, but they both do it because you have to. And I think Final Fantasy X is much the same way. And there's a maturity to it that you don't get in really any other Final Fantasy for that regard. Like, two people who care very deeply for each other know that this can't last, and that for the good of the world, it has to be sacrificed.
Yeah,
and that to me is like so important, and I think just so true, and like I think truer to what the concept of love is than just about anything else.
The fact that they engage in this final battle knowing full well what it's going to mean for the nature of Tidus existing in this world.
His existence will be severely hampered after this.
Yeah, basically. So Final Fantasy X obviously stands out to both of us a lot. That we talked about this earlier, and I know that I've said this before. Final Fantasy X was what Final Fantasy VIII wanted to be, but
when it grew up,
much better. They like Final Fantasy VII. I'll just get all the Final Fantasies out of the way real quick. FF6, one of the few things that doesn't stand out to me is its love story, because I guess Celes and Locke were together, but that never impacted me.
There isn't really one. Like, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah. But Final Fantasy VI is my favorite Final Fantasy of all time, but I had to just mention it. Like, it doesn't really come up in this discussion, and here's why.
I will say, I think the opera scene, there is something deeply romantic about that, and kind of and when I say romantic, maybe not so much in
romantic, not in the relationship,
the love sense, but more in the like the classical kind of literary element. Like it feels like a Byron or kind of play or something like that.
Yeah. Final Fantasy VII, it hit me in my teenage years, and like the relationship between Cloud and Tifa was so one-sided.
And that's what always bugged me about it.
I thought it was romantic at the time, but like looking back as an adult, I'm like, Cloud was
You thought it was romantic at the time?
I guess.
Really?
Like I thought it was.
I was younger than you. I was younger than you when I played Final Fantasy VII.
I mean, come on, like that's something.
But like, okay, so here's my problem with it, right? And people have argued me on this point. I don't care. This is the correct interpretation of this game. I was younger than you when I played this because you're old, and
by like a year.
Doesn't matter. You're old, and the thing that jumped out at me, like, this is not a healthy relationship. Right? Like, no, Tifa is I felt really, like, I really resonated. Like, Tifa is my favorite character in that game because of this. Like, at the time, because every idiot middle schooler knows this, you know what it's like to be in love with someone who just doesn't care. Right? Mm-hmm. You always have those crushes and that sort of thing. So I kind of felt like that was like,
because he does not care about anybody.
Well, he doesn't care about anybody, but he especially doesn't care about Tifa. He's very attached to this ideal, this other woman, this heiress who he barely knows. And he barely knows Tifa too, but that's a whole whatever. Yeah. But he barely knows Eris. He knows her for like maybe 20 minutes. And like everything he does for her. And even at the end, after everything they've been through, they have this moment, Cloud and Tifa do. And his first thing is, and when he says to her is, "Let's go see Eris." And then you
I forgot about that part. Holy shit, that's really terrible.
That's really and people have said, well, that's not really what the scene's about. No, this is what the scene's about. Cloud's a jerk.
And I mean,
we see this like disappointment.
I'm not going to claim to remember or understand the Final Fantasy VII mythology, but she knew.
I
him
only
as a
remember
kid.
this because it bothered me so much when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, like, but Tifa is the one who knew him as a kid. Like she actually had affection for him. Going back a long time.
And
at any rate, coming off of Final Fantasy VII.
I'm not done yet, though. Because the animation in that scene, like, we can talk about, like, it's obviously very primitive computer animation by today's standards, whatever. But they conveyed so clearly the disappointment, I think, in her face and the resignation, because she says, "Yeah, let's go see her," and like she's not. Yeah, she's like I know
this is your ex.
Yeah, so, I don't know, Tifa, you can do better. Cloud is the only time Cloud's ever been cool was in Smash Brothers. There, I said it.
All right. So coming off of Final Fantasy VII,
yeah,
they tried to tell this they tried to tell this romance story in Final Fantasy VIII. That was like the thesis of Final. I remember them saying like this game is about love.
Well,
and
no, was it 8 that was about love, or was it 10 where they really played that up? Because I can't remember.
I feel like in the promotional materials for 8 they mentioned it a lot. Again, it's been years, who knows? But it was this very weird melodrama that even gullible child that I was that actually liked Final Fantasy VII's story. Even then, I was like, this isn't good. And I can't put my finger on exactly what it was, but it was just unsatisfyingly melodramatic, and I feel like Squall was them doubling down on the Cloud. I'm a too cool loner thing. Like it was that syndrome, but like even more so.
There is a point in Final Fantasy VIII where Cloud and Renoa somehow, like, I gave up trying to remember what happens in this game. I don't really care.
Something a witch who turns out to not be bad.
And then they're all kids together. It doesn't matter. Look, the point that like it bothers me. They're out in space on a space shuttle for some reason, or a rocket, or it doesn't matter. It does not matter. And somehow, I can't remember if it's Squall or Renoa drifts off into space, and you have to go after them.
Oh my god, I totally forgot about the space part. They go to space.
This thing, and you're very slowly trying to get to this person, and if you don't get to them in a certain amount of time, they die. I think I might have actually let them die on purpose once. But no, I really my secret hope was that the airlock would close behind them and they would both just drift in space forever. Nothing about that relationship worked for me. It just felt so forced, so fake, and it ruined two characters who I thought independently weren't too bad. But by bringing them together, I think just sacrificed everything interesting about them. Final Fantasy VIII has the worst love story, maybe of all of them.
Of all media ever.
No, of all Final Fantasies, there are worse love stories, trust me. But
let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about Final Fantasy quite a bit here. Let's talk about...
I do want to give a shout out, by the way. We do have Joe Foreman is watching and corrected our pronunciation of Titus. He tweeted at me, Titus. I'm like, no, Joe.
Nope, we covered that.
No.
We definitely went into that immediately. So Final Fantasy is emblematic of this scripted kind of story. We've talked about this in terms of storytelling in general, but now we're talking about love stories. When it comes to games, the thing about games that sets them apart, that we've said a million times, is that you have agency, you have choice, right. You have you can guide the path. In Final Fantasy, you don't really do that. So let's talk a little bit about games where you do have some agency and the ways that does and doesn't work. I'm thinking mostly of Mass Effect and Dragon Age.
I'll start with Mass
Effect. You have. Well, let me name a couple of examples. You have Mass Effect and Dragon Age. They're of the same kind. You have an array of characters that have sexual preferences, and you can get with one of them. There's also, along these lines, there's also The Witcher, which I feel like is a lot like Mass Effect in that way, but it's a little less gamey. It's a little less, you're around this person all the time, and you can make sure you go to them between each mission and talk to them to build up your trust meter so that eventually you can go to bed with them. It's not really like that. It's more just like, as he's adventuring through the world, he meets these women that are into him for one reason or another, and he can either capitalize on that or decline it. It's like it's more of a, when the opportunity arises, are you going to take it or not kind of thing. But it's along the same lines of Mass Effect.
Okay. And so the thing that jumps out at me in these games where, and I haven't gotten too far into The Witcher, like literally, the last thing I did was I killed the Griffin, and I went back to the guy who's like in charge of the Empire. He offered to give me money. I told him to shove it. So
you're very early,
riding off. Yeah, I'm super early on, and I haven't really gotten to the romance part, and I would love to get back to that game eventually, but
it's daunting. I know it is.
I like playing it, but that's another discussion. But these games where you have the choice to pursue certain romantic partners, this to me, I think, illustrates a challenge in telling romantic stories in an interactive medium. Because in most cases with these games, in order to romance the character, you have to do a certain number of things in the correct order. Like these switches have to be flipped in order to get this person to go from acquaintance, soldier, comrade, to person that will share an undying love with you, right? And so it's like, well, if I present this gift at this time and I choose this dialogue option and this dialogue option, I will then therefore flip the correct switches in this character's head to get them to go out with me, to fall in love with me. That's not how it works in the real world. That's not all. And like I know there's a whole cottage industry, and we're getting maybe far afield of games when I talk about this, but there's a whole cottage industry that looks at love and romance that way. It just doesn't work that way. Okay. Yeah, well, say if you say this thing to this girl at this right time, you're going to get them to just like automatically, go to bed with you, right? It's a very shallow view of relationships. I don't know how to fix it for games, but I do.
The way that you put it the other day when we were sort of talking about this topic and doing it on the show is that like that's a very engineer way of attacking the problem.
It's something an engineer would come up with. If then this.
I think that's fair. I think that's a fair criticism of it as a development platform. But I also think we need to turn the mirror around and look at the community, who has a tendency to min-max everything in games. So the fact that we know that how these systems work is partly because there's like this thriving internet community that picks apart how every system works, not just the romance systems, every system. And they're like, okay, what's your target? What's your goal? Here's how you get there. Here's the steps,
And I think but you see there's a fundamental difference. Let me see if I can step back. In real life, there's a fundamental difference between this is what you need to do to max out your character's agility or max out your character's proficiency with a sword versus this is what you need to do to be a functioning human being that has a relationship with another functioning human being.
Here's what you need to do to get an awkward puppetry sex scene between
and so that
Shepard
comes back to the point.
Jack,
and that comes back to the point where in games, these two very disparate concepts, they aren't that different. Right? Like to get this desired outcome, to get this ending, you have to do X, Y, and Z. Go to this mission, do this mission before this time, so on and so forth. And again, I don't want to like throw anybody under the bus for that because I think that there are inherent limitations to doing that sort of thing in an interactive space. I don't know what the answer is. Trust me, I'm not smarter than anybody who works at BioWare. But
I mean, I have an answer. I don't know if it's a satisfying one, but it's one that we can chew on a little bit.
Go for it.
I think when it comes to actual relationships and actual love, there's a lot of little elements that we don't actually see or think about that affect how we feel at any given time. Like what you had for breakfast that morning might be affecting how you feel, which might affect whether or not you want to even bother with thinking about, this person that just came and said hi to you. That all, it's not random in the true sense because there's biology and things like that going on, but it comes off as randomness in our lives. It comes off as something that can't be quantified. So if you actually wanted to imitate love in games in that way, you need to introduce a level of randomness to imitate the idea of some things that can't be quantified. I think the reason they can't do that, the reason they probably won't do that, is because that would be frustrating as hell for a lot of players who just want, wish fulfillment. They want to be the cool space adventurer that goes out with the pretty alien lady after setting his sights on her.
Right. And I get that. Like, I really do get that. And, honestly, you can make the argument that really what Mass Effect and Dragon Age and these kind of games are trying to do is not that. Like, they have another agenda in mind and another master they have to serve. And I don't want to like come across as saying that, these games fail at this because I think considering the circumstances, they're probably doing the best they can.
Yeah. They're presenting it in a way that, that is not really true to life. And in the ways that it is true to life, it's true to life that in a way that the people who look at love that way are, broken.
I would even say that. I think that they're just trying to quantify a situation that is inherently not quantifiable.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's no strategy guide for love. There's your tag, right there. Bam, there's your tag.
I'm going to write a book
for this episode
called that.
There's no strategy guide for love, and it gets really weird. Like there are these nerd romance guides, and like nothing makes my skin crawl more than the concept of these things. They're like, here's what you do: treat it like a quest. You've got to do this, this, and this, and you know, once you do this, you'll level up your relationship. I'm like, no, this is not healthy. Like, this is not a responsible way to talk
everything.
About this.
Yeah,
you cannot gamify love. There you go. Bam. Tagline 2. No strategy guide for love. You can't gamify love.
These are the taglines for the movie. Yeah, when we make one.
When we make a movie out of this podcast, those are the things on the poster. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. So I think we talked a little bit about how they can improve and some things that have stood out to us.
Can I do one thing though? I do want to give special shout out along the lines of how I thought Final Fantasy X handled the relationship very effectively in a mature fashion. I think Mass Effect did something very similar with some of its romantic side quests. I can't say so much for Dragon Age. I think they do some interesting things too. But I want to call out specifically in Mass Effect 2, my Shepard romanced Thane. Mostly because all the other options were really not that interesting to me.
Yeah, you got with the Frogman.
Yeah, but Thane I thought was kind of an interesting character. I wanted to get to know more about him. And how it plays out and how Thane's story ends in Mass Effect 3, I think really speaks to like this kind of deeper thing. Like it's a relationship, it's romance that was genuine, but literally, again, it's something that has to end through forces that neither of them can control. And I think there's something sweet about the fact that, you know, and I guess can we spoil how that thread ends? Like,
I mean, it's an old.
So Thane dies. Thane dies because he has
pretty much everyone dies in Mass Effect. Like a lot of people die.
Yeah, but Thane dies because of like a cancer or some sort of disease he has. And like, so the conclusion of that love story, if you carry over from Mass Effect 2, is that you are literally there with him at the end of his life. You are providing love and support in like a palliative sense. And that to me is something that really does not happen in games, but is such a huge part of what love and romance is. And it's part of the reason we get into it is because you want somebody there to support you in those moments. So kudos to BioWare for doing that. I thought that was like exceptionally well done. And along those lines, I don't want to like bag on them constantly.
Yeah. But along those lines, this isn't actually the romance quest that I pursued.
Because you have really bad taste compared to.
Because I have bad taste. Yeah, that's true. But no, like I think the Asari lady, Liara, that's it.
Yeah.
I think I was just devoted to Liara like through all 3 games.
The basic choice, right?
Yeah, like the default, the vanilla. But at any rate, from what I've heard about the Jack, romance, so that you've got this character that they created that is very hard-edged and hard to get to know and hard to get to care about you, and they established through some of her dialogue that she has this abusive past, and as far as I've heard, again, I haven't actually done this one, but as far as I've heard, the culmination of her romance quest is like she's crying and you're like there for her, and it's like, okay, well that's a very like mature depiction of where that relationship might go.
Yeah, it's not
based on what that character is like.
It's not about like, physical intimacy in the way that, most of the others are, right? Like it's a different kind of intimacy. It's like this person who's deeply vulnerable being there and providing that support for them. That is like just as part of just as a bigger part of a relationship, honestly, than is the sexual element, right? So, again, like I even though like we're calling out BioWare specifically in a lot of the things that games don't handle well about romance, they do get right. Like they actually probably do a better job and put more thought into it than most.
Yeah. And there's
this is not like a God of War mini game situation.
Oh my God.
Actually,
I mean, like that's
we don't have to get into that one specifically, but
that's the other end of the spectrum where it's just like he just walks up to like a bunch of naked ladies
and then you hit
and then you mash on the A button.
Let's not get into that.
I think somewhere in between in that spectrum is probably The Witcher, where he's not it's not disrespectful to the women or anything like that. It's always perfectly, consensual, and they are usually inviting. And it's almost like as a Witcher, as this person who like has dulled his emotions, and I think I read that like all Witchers are infertile anyway, just like all mages in that world. It's sort of like well, why not? Like I have this sort of like weird subpar existence. So as long as I'm here, like I might as well enjoy myself with this woman who wants to be affectionate towards me. So I think their actual love scenes are, animated a notch above most, so it actually comes off pretty well. And I wouldn't call them exploitive. I would call them, more HBO like, in that they're trying to evoke sensuality. You know what I mean? But it's somewhere it's somewhere in between the exploring a relationship with someone in Mass Effect and the absolutely no relationship. Right. Just a dumb mini game of God of War.
And that's what I'm going to say. Like and this is where some people might disagree with me, and I fully welcome that conversation. But I think it's easier to do sensuality than it is actual love in a game. Like it's very easy to be tittillating. It's a lot harder to really talk about what it means to be connected with another human being.
That's true for all media, right? Like you can you can show sensuality on like Game of Thrones does it like at least once every episode. Like it's characters that you don't even know or care about. They'll walk into a brothel and there's ladies.
Yeah,
it's
like I think I want to say I actually heard like HBO has like a mandate that shows have to have a certain degree of nudity or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising.
I think they get away with it, but not. But I really want to say like there is like
you ain't gonna pull that shit on Elaine Bennis. She's
but yeah, and again, like when I talk about this stuff, I'm not saying that games are incapable of doing this stuff. I want to see somebody come up with an answer that we haven't. Like I want to see somebody solve the problem in a way that we haven't considered.
And I think there's this other type of game that we haven't really touched on very much yet. There's this other type of game, the dating simulator, the sort of Japanese,
the visual novels, the dating simulators.
It's usually from Japan. It's usually anime inspired or even based on an anime. And I think usually they've been on like handheld devices because that's sort of the home for those things right now. Like that's a whole different
Well, Steam's
avenue
doing
of it.
Pretty brisk business in them too right now. So they're really big on Steam.
It's sort of the same symptom as the min-maxing with Mass Effect type of thing, where people make guides where they're like, okay, this is the hardest girl to get. If you want her, you got to do this. You got to do X, Y, and Z in this order, and it's almost like that times a million because the entire game is that, so they have to make it more complicated.
Well, I
kind of feel like if you approach that game in the way they intend you to, I don't think that the people who are making those games intend you to look up a FAQ. I think they probably intend you to just play it and see somebody that you're like, oh, that person seems interesting and I'd like to get to know them better, and then you like pursue it. And I think that those introduce a level of complexity that it's not randomness, like I was saying earlier, but it can feel like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's probably an approach to the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. And I'm really curious because there's a lot of people, not just in Japan, but there's a lot of visual novel creators like Christine Love and people like that, for example, Anna Anthropy, who have approached this concept of the visual novel, the dating simulator, and are trying to like use it to explore a lot more. When I say adult themes, obviously, of course, there's like sex, nudity, that kind of stuff, but more just the aspect of like what a relationship is about, power dynamics, that sort of thing.
Wasn't there a game that came out not too long ago? I'm blanking on the name, but it was imitating like a chat log, and you're sort of like exploring this chat log between two people. I forget the title. I'm sure people are going to remind me of it, but that sounded like an interesting approach. No, it was along the lines of her story, but it was something.
And I think too, like maybe sometimes the easiest solution is maybe talk about love in a context other than the world is ending, the universe is in trouble. We'll just have to have these fleeting moments. Like Gone Home, I think addressed a concept of love and romance and identity and that sort of thing in a really clever way that you're like literally putting the pieces together the same way your sister did, right? So Gone Home is just great. Like that was that is absolutely a game too. I don't care what anybody says. Gone Home is a game.
Yeah. So before we move on to some other
that's where I lose the other
segments. No, I'm with you. But that's just a discussion that I'm so sick of even having. Anyway.
I'm sorry to even brought it up, but I just want to mention Gone Home because I do think it handles love and romance in a very interesting meaning.
Before we move on to newsy bits in our game real quick, name any other game relationships that stood out to you and why. Just anything that comes to mind.
The smart aleck answer is Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man, but
they're truly a love that will live forever.
Yeah. But why don't you go first? Because I actually need a second
I
to
think
think.
Mario and Peach is like a very sweet relationship.
Mhm.
Like it's so kid friendly and innocuous that it's like, she kisses him on the nose once, I think, and like that's about as far as it goes. But it's like,
I'm not even sure it's 100% a romantic relationship.
yeah.
I really don't. I don't know.
They are definitely friends. They hang out together. They're seen hanging out together a lot. But it just seems sweet. It always strikes me as like, oh, that's cute. Like that's a sweet, cute thing.
I think it depends on the interpretation. Like in some of the RPGs, for example, it comes across as a little bit more of a not platonic relationship.
Yeah.
Or like there is like some mutual fondness that goes beyond just being friends.
I think classic RPGs are what stand out the most to me about relationships, partly because I played them as a teenager. So like, just things like Chrono Trigger, like that game is about a lot more than relationships. But the impetus that starts all this is Chrono like meets a pretty girl. And he kind of wants
it's a meet cute.
Yeah, like he wants to hang out with her, and then that ends up leading him on this grand adventure.
So you're trying to make the case right now that Chrono Trigger is a romantic comedy.
It is, yeah.
Because I'll go down that path with you. But
there's that hilarious part
that's
about
what
the apocalypse.
Yeah. I mean, like the RPGs are kind of the obvious answer in a lot of cases, and I think I liked in some ways how The Walking Dead, the Telltale version, kind of touched on that notion of, adult relationships being very difficult to maintain. And some like you
never got a certain answer over whether Lee did what he was arrested for. Or
to
what extent he did.
I'm sorry, I didn't even think about that element of the story. That's not what I'm getting at all, just so we're clear.
Okay.
The fact that Lee may or may not have murdered his wife and the guy she was cheating on with is not what I'm talking about.
He clearly was not okay with that relationship,
And
so
but
it was
then some of the relationships
referencing.
But some of the relationships you get into, like with other characters throughout, or like some of the things you see happening on the periphery, like Kenny's relationship with his wife and like how that kind of affects him and that sort of thing. I think that it deals with those concepts in a pretty meaningful way. Honestly, in a way, I don't think the other Walking Dead media do. So that's another one I would kind of call out and say that there are some definite powerful relationships in there.
Yeah, that's a good one. So we can move on to our newsy bits here, but first, a word from our sponsors.
That's right, Brian. Steve. I'm not the sponsor, but Audible is. Audible.com is offering you,
Brian,
the listeners of the Shack News Chattycast, a free audiobook download and a free 30-day trial to check out their service. Tons of great books on games, tech, lots of other topics to choose from. If you want to check out a book, any book, over 150,000 of them, go to get your free audiobook download from audibletrial.com/chattycast. Again, that's audibletrial.com/chattycast.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm going to speed through these newsy bits. We don't have a huge amount of them that I thought would fuel great discussion, but I had to bring up this one first and foremost, talking about maybe adult-oriented topics. The news came out this week that The Binding of Isaac Rebirth is not coming on iOS, or at least it was rejected for now, due to depicting child abuse. iOS is very strict about its content guidelines, and obviously, as the gatekeepers, they are allowed to be. I'm a little bit disturbed by the idea that depicting something bad automatically disqualifies it, even if it's to make some sort of artistic point.
And this is not something that is new for Apple. Like there have been a lot of games that they have claimed were offensive or claimed that have elements that are objectionable they don't want on their service, but were intended to make a point. And I think this is, I don't really believe in the slippery slope argument, but I do think that it does continue to demonstrate that there are significant limitations when it comes to putting your game on certain platforms. And I think that it is really unfortunate that Apple made this decision. I'm not a fan of Binding of Isaac. I just couldn't get into it as a game. But I do think it has. Either.
So like this isn't coming from a place of like, oh, I love that game. But it just feels stifling to the medium.
It does.
To the medium's progress, being able to tackle subject matter that is a little more difficult.
And that game does try to do that. Like it does try to delve into those topics, and I think it's worth talking about.
It's sort of the same problem by you can't ever produce an AO game,
right?
So if you want to be extremely graphic in some way in order to make a point, which granted most games don't have to be, but like if you want to be, like you really can't be because you don't have a platform. it's problematic, and it's one of those things that I think our industry is going to have to get over, because it's not as if Apple is rejecting like movies that depict child abuse.
Exactly,
you know,
and that's the biggest
as well.
Yeah, and that's the biggest concern. I think Apple.
When Room comes out on home video, they're going to sell it on.
Yeah, they're not going to give up on that. But there is a clear double standard at work, I think, in how Apple does business with the App Store. And I think part of it is, especially with game apps, they see them as being aimed at a much younger audience. And so they're really kind of, I think, based on this, stuck in that mindset that, well, kids play games on the iPhone, therefore we have to make sure they're all appropriate for kids.
Therefore, they might just tap wildly and buy this game and then see this horrible thing.
Yeah. But we're totally okay having like a Walking Dead game where you're like hacking zombies' arms off and stuff like that.
We have weird hangups in America.
Well, I mean, not even America, just Apple specifically, I think, has this weird. I'm not surprised, but it is a bummer.
It is Apple, and but I think Apple is responding to what they think would probably be the backlash, and they might be right. From concerned parent groups and things like that. So moving on, the World of Warcraft,
what Nintendo used to do back in the day.
So World of Warcraft may be given, like the actual game, may be given out for free to Warcraft moviegoers. I think this is kind of genius.
It's genius, but also it's really genius. But isn't Warcraft World of Warcraft free to play now?
I mean, up to level 20, yeah.
They're not like missing much. I mean.
I think they're giving a little bit extra. They're giving like maybe a longer period of trial and things like that. So it's a little extra. Whatever. It's free if you're going to see the Warcraft movie anyway. I don't know who's going to see the Warcraft movie who has not already like made a decision on whether or not they're going to play World of Warcraft.
I haven't actually seen the story you're referring to yet. Have they said whether or not like that comes with like an exclusive pet or anything like that? Because I could see if you gave away a pet or something like that, that would probably goose up ticket sales pretty dramatically.
They haven't said anything like that. I would actually be surprised if something like that didn't happen.
If it doesn't, they are fools. They are absolute fools.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is that you keep your ticket stub, but there's a player survey being sent out by Blizzard for a product called the World of Warcraft Ultimate Movie Edition. Contains digital copies of World of Warcraft and all previous expansions and 1 month of free game time and an exclusive in-game item. It would be free with a purchase of the ticket to Warcraft. So giving out all the expansions, that's pretty significant. There's also news this week, sort of semi-related to this, that the Warcraft or Hearthstone Heroes of Warcraft, we're going to be hearing something more about their expansion in March. We don't know if that's going to be when they're launching it or whatever, but that's when we're going to hear a little more about it. And as some commenters observed, like that's getting close to the Warcraft movie. It is. So if Blizzard is trying to smartly synergize all this stuff, it would make a lot of sense.
They are pretty on top of things like this, so I think they'll do something. It would be because they're so good at like cross promoting all of their different things. So I hope that's what they do, because I do worry a little bit about the Warcraft movie. I
think it looks pretty good.
I'm not worried about the quality. I think it looks solid from the trailers alone, but I'm worried about how it sells. I've seen a lot of skepticism, a lot of people laughing at the orcs and stuff like that, which just goes to show like they have
Warcraft.
Well, I mean, like they look so fake. Well, orcs aren't real. Like
newsflash. So one more quick newsy bit before I subject you to my game. That sounds like I have you in some sort of saw-like contraption. I'm sorry, but
don't you though?
So I know that you're super hype for our Street Fighter episode next week.
Yeah,
Ozzy has already been playing Street Fighter. He's not right now. He's out on an event, but he's already been playing Street Fighter. I'm saying that just to inspire jealousy in you. Street Fighter 5, there's been a leak where apparently Alex is going to be a DLC character. I do not know that much about Alex, but I thought I would bring this up for you.
Alex was a character from the Street Fighter 3 series. And if I recall correctly,
I recognized his face when I saw the story. Like, I know that guy, but I don't,
If I remember right, he was kind of so Ken and Ryu were kind of the main guys for Street Fighter, all the other Street Fighters, but Alex was one of the main new guys for Street Fighter 3. He's a big grappler brawler type. he would not be the first one I would bring over if you're asking me. But I can definitely, I see the logic behind getting him because there is, I don't think there's a ton of Street Fighter 3 representation. And again, I don't have the roster in front of me. I haven't quite been following this as obsessively as I normally would. But yeah, so I'm not, and I think they officially confirmed it. Like they've actually given like a DLC roadmap now of exactly what they're doing and when. They have not confirmed any of the other DLC characters that are coming out, and I don't know if he's part of the season pass or not. But I mean, yeah, sure. Why not? Why not put him in there?
Why not?
There's no
Alex,
reason not to.
That'll be the slogan, Alex. Because why not?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's no reason not to have him in there. I just cannot get that excited about it. Now, if it was like Rolento or Skullomania, or I mean, I have a list of characters that I would love to have in this game.
Skullomania, yeah.
Skullomania would be on there.
I love Skullomania. He's the dumbest thing.
He's so stupid, But yeah, like, they gave me Karen, they gave me Armika, they gave me a bunch of characters from Street Fighter Alpha,
which is mask off, and it was Dan. How would you react?
Is Dan Hibiki in this game? Because if he's not, that's a huge problem. I'm looking that up right now.
That's a good point.
Because if Dan's not in here,
then my pre-orders can't
seriously reconsidering getting this game. Let me see right here. Yeah, I don't see Dan.
You fucked up, Capcom.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
Right.
I'm guessing he'll probably be a DLC character.
We're going to move on very quickly to distract from the lack of Dan to beat the doc. You are the doc, so obviously so
I'm playing against myself.
You're playing against yourself. This is a single player game. I've adapted it to be a single player game. Today's game is called Ratings Board. I'm going to read the ESRB description of a game, and you tell me which game it is. Pretty simple. As you know, these ratings can be hilariously clinical about some really awful things. So to fit today's themes, all of these games have sexuality, suggestive themes, or nudity as one of their content descriptors. And these are very long, so I do not expect to get all the way through any of them. Just interrupt me when you think you know. Okay?
I will do my best, but I'm almost wondering if the only winning move in this game is not to play. That might be the way to go.
There's 5 in all. A perfect score. So a perfect score would be 5.
So I'm just showing off, really. That's all I'm doing. Yeah,
you're just trying to name them all. Ready?
Okay, I'll do it. I will do it for the good of the show, to entertain the people listening. I will do
it. All right. This is an action-adventure game in which players assume the role of a half-human, half-godlike Spartan who seeks revenge on the gods of war. That is God of War. It was God of War 3, but God of War.
They're all the same. It's all basically the same thing.
Well, whatever. The sexuality part is hold on. One sequence contains a sex minigame. They actually say that players encounter a goddess and 2 of her handmaidens.
I was going to say the saddest part is I actually remember how this one's different from the others. But in my defense, my wife is a huge God of War fan, so that's how I know.
Yeah. It's yes, your wife.
No, she actually is. Like we talked about this before.
It's hilarious how they pick these things apart. All right.
Yeah. All right. I will let you get
survival horror. This is a survival horror adventure game in which players help 8 friends survive a serial killer at a mountain retreat. As players progress through the game, they explore fully interactive environments, choosing a variety of action/decision paths via on-screen prompts. Some choices can lead to depictions of intense violence and/or gore. Characters shot in the head, characters cut in half by a saw blade, characters disemboweled or decapitated, a character forced to cut off segments of his fingers, large blood splatter effects in rugby anytime occur.
No, I know what
as characters are killed or injured. Some
where this is going.
Depict bloodstains. The game includes some sexual material, dialogue that contains sexual remarks, e.g., "Let's party like we're effing porn stars."
All right, I'll stop you here. It's Until Dawn. I know.
It is Until Dawn. The other example of dialogue they had was, "I mean, if you're not going to bang her, maybe Mike will take up the case," which sounds like the perfect kind of like stupid teenager dialogue. That
I still haven't played that. I do want to play that because I think it's an interesting idea.
All right, number 3. So far, you've got a perfect score. Number 3.
Of course, I do.
This is a strategy game in which players rule a nation by tending to citizens' needs, while also navigating politics among foreign powers. As a dictator, players can order their officers to assassinate rebellious citizens. Players can also command soldiers and tanks to quash rebel uprising and protests. These conflicts are accompanied by realistic gunfire and small explosions. Events occasionally reference suggestive material, like your family's rather rollicking love life has led to an unexpected pregnancy, or or go have fun, do the mile high. The dialogue also contains references to alcohol. I won't give the examples for that. Players can grow tobacco as well as build cigar factories and rum distilleries in order to create export industry. Yeah,
this would be Tropico, right?
Tropico. It is Tropico 5, but I'm counting
Tropico
really
5,
any of them. Yes.
Yeah, I've never played any of them, but I know that Tropico. I know what Tropico is. So I assumed it was that.
It's one of them. Yeah, that's all you really need.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This is an action-adventure game in which players primarily assume the role of blank as he battles several villains spreading chaos. Players traverse a variety of locations while battling thugs, examining crime scenes, and occasionally rescuing hostages. Players engage in melee-style combat using punches, kicks, and gadgets. Enemies cry out in pain when struck, and some takedowns are highlighted by brief slow-motion effects and local impact sounds. So clinical. Makes me laugh. Some sequences allow players to use tank-like vehicles with machine gun turrets and rockets to shoot enemies. A vehicle's wheels are also used to torture an enemy in one sequence. Cutscenes depict characters getting shot while restrained or unarmed. Large bloodstains / pools of blood appear in crime scenes and in the aftermath of violent acts. One room depicts a person torturing a character on a bloody operating table. During the course of the game, players can shoot unarmed characters and a hostage. Neon signs in a red light district read "Live Nude Girls" and "XXX."
I'm just gonna stop. This is Batman Arkham Knight.
It is Batman Arkham Knight. You are correct. That was almost the end. You let me get almost through that entire thing.
Well, I'm debating. Like, do I just let you keep going? Because I've known all the answers like immediately so far. But
you are a jerk. All right.
But I like making you read them because I think it's
you're
funny.
A little robotic. But this is gonna be a fun one. Hold on.
Okay.
Last one, going for a perfect score. This is an open-world action game in which players assume the role of a criminal character rising through the ranks. Players traverse a virtual city, prison, and demonic realm to battle alien creatures, demonic hordes, and enemy gang members. Players use realistic guns, alien weaponry, and super abilities to kill enemies. In a handful of missions, players are tasked with killing police officers and dispensing mayhem to complete objectives. Large blood splatter effects occur during combat. Some weapons cause characters to explode into pools of blood. Characters also depict intense acts of violence, characters executed at point-blank range, players shooting or driving over pedestrians. During the course of the game, some female characters are depicted topless with pasties over their breasts. A handful of sequences depict female pole dancers performing at a strip club. Players can also initiate brief romantic encounters between characters. One scene depicts a robot hovering in front of a male character.
Yeah, okay. I know what this is now.
There is no depiction of the sex act. A fictional drug is prominent in the game, and characters can sometimes be seen using the drug to boost powers. The screen distorts to show the effects. The word fuck, shit, and asshole can be heard in dialogue. Whew.
So, I almost feel like I'm going to get this wrong, but my guess is it's okay. Yeah, and I know for sure it's now Saints Row 4.
It is Saints Row 4.
Okay. Yeah, the demonic realm. I'm guessing this is specifically the bundle that also has Gat Out of Hell.
Yeah. It is the full on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because at first I was like, well, didn't True Crime or one of those games have like a demonic realm and all that? But I'm like, no, the alien weaponry. Okay, yeah, it's Saints Row, but
yeah, I mean, like the robot fellatio, I feel like was ruled out any other series. All right, that's the show. That got weird. I like that game though. That's fun. The way I intend it to work when I actually have two players is whoever has the answer first jump in and interrupt me.
But the way that I do it is more fun because I want to make you read all of these descriptions.
Oh, and they are awful. All right, so that's the show. We have obviously a Fire Emblem review going up sometime soon, and actually we have a bunch of guides going up right now for things like Dying Light. So that's my little plug for things on the site off the top of my head, things that have gone up recently or are going up soon. Do you have anything you would like to plug?
Not particularly. I like to plug the idea of love. I think that there's a power to love, if you will, and it doesn't take money and it won't take fame.
Okay, I'm gonna
credit card to ride this train.
I'm gonna cut your mic.
It's strong and it's subtle, but it's smooth sometimes, and it might just save your life. So I just really want to really advocate for the power of love.
Thank you. That was great, Huey. All All right, so
I'm
that's
doing it
the
all for my
show.
baby, Steve. Doing it all for my baby.
And in absentia for several cast members that would normally be joining us but are too busy today. I am Steve Watts,
I am the news.
and we'll see you on Chatty.